Well, today I've got one of the most unbelievable heroes in the health world, and his name's Patrick van der Burgt. He's a true health pioneer. He's taught me almost everything about the damaging effects of electromagnetic radiation. He's put me through as a GeoVital consultant. I went to Melbourne and trained with him, and he's a real expert in this field. So there's going to be a significant amount of information. His expertise is world known. And so welcome to the Made to Thrive show, Patrick van der Burgt.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Good. I want to start with your own story. You know, there's a lot of wounded healers out there where they've gone through pain and suffering, and then they've developed their purpose. Naval Ravikant said that suffering is the seed of change. Tell us your story, how you became this electromagnetic radiation mitigation consultant, and just how you believe that this is such an important area for people to thrive in health and performance.
Absolutely. All right. My partner at the time was diagnosed with the brain cancer, and she was queued up for surgery and those sorts of things. You got chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and she kind of backfired on her. She was not able to continue along that path. So we were kind of forced to look at alternative and complementary approaches to health. And so we found those. We did some pulse magnetic field therapy, some bioresonance therapy, and lifestyle changes. And that worked really, really well. The brain cancer, the surge and comet, that had shrunk a tiny, tiny bit, but growing and shrinking is, of course, an enormous difference. And they couldn't put it in writing, but they attribute to the success of the operation that eventually happened to take it out to what we've been doing complementary and alternatively. And so at that point, we thought, well, we could possibly help other people with that. So we started studying naturopathy, and we kind of looked at what other things we could do. We wanted to do the pulse magnetic field therapy, the bioresonance therapy, and we started buying that equipment. And most of this stuff comes from Germany, some of it medical equipment over there. We also did ionized oxygen therapy by Dr. Engler, interesting subject to venture into another time. And we were getting this equipment. I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked in it, but, $20,000 or $40,000 worth of equipment arriving at your doorstep. And I'm one of those guys that reads manuals. Some people just plug it in and see what happens. With me, I always read the books first. And anyway, on the inside cover of all these manuals, it just kept talking about set your equipment up in an area free of electronic pollution and geopathic stress. And it's like, what are they all on about, right? And so it was like this little slap in the face every now and then that I should go and figure this out. And so I was in Germany doing additional training on some of this equipment, and I heard about this company in Austria who was teaching courses about man-made radiation and geopathic stress, which comes from the ground. And I had tried to do training before, especially in the geopathic stress area, but also airy-fairy. It just didn't make any sense. And I'm a pilot as a background. I calculate fuel burn, point of no return, all this weight and balance number stuff, right? So yeah, you got to come with fairly logical sort of explanations for me. And anyway, it sounded like something I should be doing. So I went to Austria. I trained with them. And everything did make sense, and it was all logical. And so, my partner did great after the operation, but we then, kind of wanted to make those services available to people in this area here. We got all the equipment, and it actually never got off the ground, because as soon as I started offering assessment services for radiation, that basically completely took off. I was looking, of course, I was in Melbourne most of the time. I was doing home assessments here, and quickly enough, I was asked to go interstate to help people. GeoVital was happy with me running courses over here, which we started doing. We started getting international students to come in before too long. Anyway, make a long story short, I've been at this now for goodness around about 10 years or so, and I look after GeoVital's interests for outside Europe. And so, yeah, I look after an enormous area. I train people across many continents on how to do this. We do online training, and so we build a network of consultants that you're part of, which is lovely. And we need a lot more help. It's great. I love educating people, and that's why this is so good, because we'll be able to go into some subjects, and if anything, people will walk away from this interview knowing a lot more about the subject, and especially what I think is important, know where it matters most to deal with this stuff, because there's, as with any industry, there's so much rubbish out there of all these little magical things that you're supposedly be able to use, and it just doesn't really work for us. Let's see and explain to you what does work.
Great. I think we're going to get clarity on the subject of non-native electromagnetic fields and how they affect our bodies. But I do want to just delve a little bit into the details, Patrick. You went through a process, and then you became sort of the healer for yourself and your family and your partner. And then you decided to teach and help people sort of in the healthcare. Now, have you always had a purpose, with regards to healing people? What sort of took you from a pilot, incredible profession, to a healer, and then training other healers and other consultants?
Well, I guess it's just because it's so incredibly unfair that masses of people are exposed to this so obvious problem, and yet it's completely buried underneath everything. No government wants to, own up to the fact that we might have a problem here. And I think it just all has to do with liability. I mean, pull me back to wherever storyline you want to pull us into. But for example, magnetic fields, right? I mean, this is what starts most people off. Magnetic fields, the government exposure limit that you're allowed to be exposed to 24 hours a day in most countries is 1,000 milligauss. Canada's 833, varies a bit, but typically around that figure. That was based on thermal properties that they did testing with 25, 30 years ago. They were looking at the point where your tissue is being cooked, right? And then they figured, well, that's probably not a good idea. Let's set the standard a little bit under that and we'll be right, right? And there's, of course, ludicrous. Lots of biological changes happening before you get to the point where you're being cooked. And so with magnetic fields, 4 milligauss, we've got multiple studies indicating that we have increased chances of childhood leukemia in streets, in suburbs where that's prevalent. 2 milligauss, as low as that, we got research relating to cancer. 1.6 doubles the chances of sperm abnormalities. And there's studies in kids with leukemia who are, they're looking at their mortality rate, as in how many of those kids didn't make it. And this study finds that if they're exposed to between 1 and 2 milligauss, and I could be misquoting you a little bit here, but between 1 and 2 milligauss, their mortality rate was 260% higher than children not exposed to just 1 to 2 milligauss. And the government standard in most countries is 1,000 or 833. And I guess it's this like, are you kidding me? Right? People should know about this, right? And here you are battling with health and battling with disease. And doctors, bless them, they're all trained so hard and learn so much, but you can only learn so much, right? And there's so much research out there. You can't expect doctors to know everything that's out there, but there is so much research now out there. To quote, Dr. Erica Mallory Blythe, who I interviewed a little while ago, I've got a podcast channel too. She said that there's now more than 20,000 peer-reviewed research studies on this subject. And of course, all these studies look at their own little subsection. They look at the cells, and they might look at the immune system. They all look at different sort of parts. But more than half of those studies indicate harm. So, as she put it, the claim that we need more studies no, we don't. We got so much studies already. It's absolutely crystal clear what the problem is, but there's all these, there's this liability involved. Imagine, right? With these magnetic fields, if the government's now said, you know what, we made a little bit of a mistake. It shouldn't have been 1,000 milligauss. It should have been 0.6. Imagine that, right? How many houses would have to be condemned as unlivable? It would cripple an economy. They couldn't do it unless they were forced to do it. So yeah, anyway, that's my opinion. I think that's a bit what's going on. Same thing with the telecommunications industries. You know, those standards were set so ridiculously high because they didn't know what they were really setting at the time. And the telecommunications industries were involved in setting the standards in most countries. Some countries don't even have exposure standards for radio frequency radiation. So we're in this mass experiment. The scientists are pulling their hair out. We're worried about what we're doing to our DNA, that we might have already done damage that'll show its head, it'll rear its head up 5 generations from now, and then it's already too late to say, oh, sorry, let's not do that anymore. The damage already done. Our fertility is suffering. We know that sperm count in all Western countries is going down the toilet. And what we're doing is we're just adjusting what's normal. I said, well, everybody has this now, so this must be normal then. It just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, I guess it's this thing like more people should know about this. And me on my own doing assessment, well, that's great. I can help the individual family. But if we train more people, even on an amateur level, just so they just know more about what's actually going on, what's going on in their house, where they should really take this really serious, or train the health practitioner, the builders, the electricians, and how to actually assess for this stuff. So we can, and I guess it's that ripple effect. The more people I educate, the more people we can help.
Well, you've got an incredible vision, Patrick, and you've got a incredible purpose out there, and very grateful for your calling, because I think it is a calling, and it's a calling for justice. What I heard you were so emphatic about, people should know about this. There's a justice sort of virtue that you carry, that you want to let people know the dangers that they're exposing themselves to, because government agencies are not letting them know. In fact, they are putting them in places of harm without protecting the people that they are called to protect, are putting standards in place for people to thrive from with regard to their health and performance. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I've been sort of recipient of your knowledge and your training when I came through to Melbourne. And it opened my eyes up to the effects of all these electromagnetic fields that we've been exposed to. But let's get into a little bit of the details, the different types of fields, from high frequency to low frequency to electromagnetic fields. You spoke about, the milligauss and the different levels. We will put links to those studies. We'll get them from Patrick so we can have them in the show notes, because I'm sure many of you are going to ask me where the research is, and we'll put some links to some of the websites that have a lot of the studies. I think there's more than enough research studies. I just don't think they've been acknowledged by government and by standards. Otherwise, we would see things change significantly in the different countries. So let's get into the different fields. Patrick, and maybe you want to start with the electromagnetic fields, how you measure the milligauss, and also what are the contributing factors that increase your electromagnetic fields?
Sure, cool. All right, so magnetic fields. Magnetic fields are caused by electricity. Technically, they're called electromagnetic fields, but to not confuse people, let's just call them magnetic fields. So magnetic fields are caused by current, the usage, the flow of electricity, and you'll find this around the local distribution lines that are traveling up and down your street. You'll find them on the big transmission lines that you see traveling up and down the country. You'll find it around the cable that travels towards your house, and to some extent around the electrical wiring that's in your house. Now, normally inside the house, you don't get an awful lot of magnetic fields from the wiring, because I don't want to get too technical, but the active and the neutral cable are so close together that the magnetic fields, which are created in opposite directions, they kind of cancel each other out. So when you take a Gauss meter, which is what you use to measure magnetic fields, you have to get right on top of cabling to get a bit of a magnetic field. But typically in a residential situation, the magnetic fields that you will find will be basically fields that are coming from those big power lines running up and down your street. Now, just whilst we're on that, power lines, most people associate, a feeling of uneasiness or doubt about how great idea it is to live near transmission lines, right? And rightfully so. I mean, the magnetic fields are typically fairly strong. There are studies indicating health leukemia issues up to, they did 0 to 600 meters and then 600 to 1200 meters, and still finding an increased case of childhood leukemia in that range. Although I have to say, I think there's more a combination with the ones in the street as well. But anyway, most people would look at those transmission lines and like, I'm not sure if I want to live that close. And you're quite right. You don't want to live that close. You want to have quite a distance from them. But measure and you'll know. That's sort of, you know, one of those mottos I'm trying to get across. Instead of asking what's a safe distance, just get a meter and then just measure and you'll know. But the local distribution lines, which are the ones running up and down the street, our consultants are far more busy in homes where those things are a problem than transmission lines, because the ones running up and down the street, they are much closer to a property and they are attached, let's say, to more and more electrical systems as in each individual house. And if faults occur in those electrical systems, which is more likely in older suburbs, you can have an uneven flow of current running up and down the street. And that, again, cancels out this canceling out effect that we were talking about earlier, and that increases the output of magnetic fields from those things. So, and they're often close enough, they'll reach into the first rooms fairly easily in most situations, even if you have a front garden. And it doesn't matter if these cables are underground or above ground, magnetic fields go through everything. Although underground, the cables are typically closer together, so you get more of the canceling out effect. So we typically measure magnetic fields from the local distribution lines coming into the street, and at levels that we're concerned about. You know, sometimes it's that first bedroom, and you know, traditionally a lot of houses have got the master bedroom at the front. You know, they can be exposed to magnetic fields where we say that might not be helping you. You know, perhaps you should be moving to another bedroom in the house, or, you know, worst case scenario, the entire home is affected by it. And then, I mean, we can't tell people that they should be moving, right? Because the government limits are so high that anything we say is, you know, more cautious than the government says perfectly fine. But I always encourage people to say, well, you kind of need to do your own research and then, you know, figure out for yourself if it's a good long-term strategy for your family to stay here. And then, you know, they either take that advice or they don't. But yeah, magnetic fields typically come from the street, but it's also possible that if in the house there's something wrong with the wiring, as in it was incorrectly wired by the electrician, that often happens by mistake, then we have a flow of current in the house which follows an unintended path. And then you get very strong magnetic fields. And when you have two paths of current and magnetic fields associated to that, ironically, the space between the wires is far more intense in terms of magnetic fields than the area outside the wires. And so our patients, our health clients, are typically exactly between those wires. And so anyway, we would figure that out. Which circuit is involved. We get electricians in to try and fix that, because in the house, you have a reasonable chance of fixing it. If the magnetic fields come from outside the house, then you got very little chance of fixing it, because magnetic fields basically go through everything. You can't really shield against magnetic field. I say really, because there are materials that can do it, but they're so insane expensive and the application is so incredibly unpractical for a residential property that it's basically not an option at all.
Okay.
So in the house, we have a chance of fixing it. If it comes from outside, even we can't help you. So that then highlights, of course, the urgency that if anybody is looking for a house, and I mean, seriously, if you listen to this interview and you got one thing out of it, this is it, what's coming right now, that if you know of anybody looking to buy a house or rent a house, you're going to put their signature down on something, they need to measure magnetic fields before they put that signature down, because it's unfixable, basically. And even if you got us involved, we also have to put our hand in the air. Can't help you with it. We can alleviate all the other far more common problems in a house. We can help you do that. But this elephant in the room of the magnetic fields, that's here to stay no matter what we do. So you want to avoid that at all costs. And it's not difficult to do this. You can get a decent quality Gauss meter to do this. I mean, goodness sake. I mean, you're trying to get, you know, fairly important information of this measurement. So it's okay to spend more than, you know, $150 US or something, you know, spend a little bit of money and get something decent to measure those magnetic fields with, and then you're well educated on your house hunting ventures.
Great. So, are we going to see in the next 10 years that almost every person out there should be educated in electromagnetic fields, in these different fields that affect our health? Is that your eventual sort of goal and vision, that everybody's empowered, to look after themselves from a radiation perspective?
I'd like everybody to be involved, but I've come to terms with that there's probably 90%, 95% of people that are happy to stick their head in the sand, and if the government says it's all right, and it shouldn't be a problem, that wouldn't allow us to be exposed to this if it was bad for us. I'd love everybody to be educated, but I've come to terms with that I'm working with 5% of the world population, and it's enough people to keep us very, very busy. But through mediums like this, and by educating especially healthcare practitioners to understand a little bit about what's going on here, I think it opens the door for a lot more people to get the right information, especially when they're in trouble, right? I mean, it's great if people that are healthy know about this stuff, and some people that are healthy are in tune with this stuff. We work with some athletes, for example, and I think it's quite funny. They have their training routine, and they work their bodies really, really hard. And so the focus is normally on the training, but some of them are getting clever, and they realize, well, hang on, I do the training, and then my body needs to recover and get stronger, and it does that at night when I'm sleeping. Yeah. So what if I optimize my sleeping environment? It's like legalized doping. It's like performance enhancing sleep. And so we come in, and we, they're not sick at all. They're doing fantastic, but we're still tweaking, we're still, making that bedroom perfect.
Yeah, that's incredible, because I think there's a lot of performance athletes that listen to the podcast and will watch us on YouTube, and they can improve their performance and their recovery at night, where you've got all these cellular processes happening. You've got autophagy, the clearing out of all these dead senescent cells. You've got apoptosis that happens at night. You have a brain wash, where your brain gets rid of all this toxins that are accumulated through the lymphatic system. So your sleep is very, very important. And let's sort of move on to high frequency, your cell phone radiation, and how important that is. The next area that we want to discuss, especially at night when you want to recover, why the bedroom's so important, and maybe just intro us with a home assessment. We've spoken about the electromagnetic field. Let's talk about the cell phone radiation and the home assessment.
Okay. Maybe before we go there, I'll tie in electric fields in it, because that's sort of related to electricity. So just to tie it all off nicely. So we've got magnetic fields from current, the flow, the usage of electricity. We also have electric fields. Electric fields come from voltage. So I can have an electrical cable where no power, where the electricity is present, but it's not being used. That means I've got no flow, I've got no current, but I still have voltage there. And voltage makes the cable emit an electric field that comes out 50, 60 times per second, depending on which country you, of course, live in, 50, 60 hertz electrical systems. That field comes out and in and out and in and out relentlessly from this cable, even if you're not using anything. So, for example, some people, they've heard a little bit about radiation, so they're in the habit of unplugging anything they've got plugged into their power sockets in the bedroom. That's a good habit to have, but chances are is that the wiring inside your wall is still throwing out these electric fields. And of course, it comes out about 2 meters. Then we park our mattress against the wall, right? And chances are it's a mattress with springs in it, so that makes it even worse, right? That propagates these electric fields out even worse. And also, which you can do this little test yourself. If you grab a compass and you slide your compass over your metal-filled mattress, there's probably a 50-50 chance that you'll see that needle starting to get confused about where north is. And that's important, because your sleeping environment, you should be closer to nature, not further away from it. So if you have magnetic qualities near you, like the springs in a mattress, you can see that by that needle deviating. And if that needle, and it's not just us preaching that, there's also other people in our field that preach that, if that needle deviates by more than 5 degrees, which isn't much at all, you should be getting rid of that mattress. Anyway, that's another little story. So we park our mattress against the wall. These electric fields get even worse. And so for 8 hours, as your body is trying to rest and recoup, you're constantly exposed to this constant irritation. It just doesn't leave you alone. It's a frequency the body doesn't know. It's a radiation type that is foreign, man-made. Your body just doesn't know what to do with it. And we expect our bodies to function optimally under those circumstances, but yeah, it's obviously a little bit too much to ask. So with electric fields, they can normally be mitigated against very, very nicely. And so in a home assessment, when we investigate the home for what's going on there, I tend to have a habit, and I'm trying to train my consultants like this as well, that we give the meters to the homeowner, and they measure the walls and they measure their partner lying on the bed, and you can see this exposure on the body. And then together we figure out which electrical circuits are responsible for that. And then by simply having those deactivated at night, which can be done automatically or sometimes with remote controlled switches, we can completely remove this from a sleeping environment. If we can't do it with the circuit breakers, then we have materials that can be put onto the wall, shielding paint that can be grounded, and that would also catch those electric fields and lead them away. So we can normally deal with electric fields one way or another, but electric fields, I would say, are the most common low-level radiation exposure that we're all exposed to. You could call it the unknown EMF, as in nobody has heard about it, but everybody's got it. Because if you've got electricity in your bedroom, then chances are you've been constantly exposed to it. All right, so that's electric fields. Then let's move on to radio frequency radiation or high frequency radiation. So to keep it simple, that's all the stuff that measures, that travels through the air without cables. So that is cell phone towers, airport navigation systems, radar, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all these things that travel through the air. There's an enormous amount of studies that highlight health issues on that. We'll provide you with a whole list. We'll provide you a link to the Bio-Initiative report, which is a 1,600-page document put together by 29 international authors, amongst which 22 PhD, who researched the available research, put that together in a summary for you, basically. And so this radiation type mucks around with our sympathetic nervous system. Our fight and flight response starts getting activated. We know that our blood pressure is associated to that. Our digestion suffers. And then there's also research on links to damaging the finer organs. Anyway, lots of health issues, and the exposure to that is ever increasing. We have studies on 3G, I think 4G as well, larger studies on how sections of the population have been affected. I know there's this study in some city where one side of the city had more money and there were more phone towers there than the poorer side of the city, and they were looking at I think it was brain cancers, and those numbers, they're in a nice comparison with how much cell phone towers there were. There's another study which I found fascinating about diabetes, and they had two schools, and they measured the radio frequency radiation level, and it was 4 times higher in one school than the other. And the researchers concluded that all the diabetes markers had gone up compared with the two schools. What was more worrying for me when I was looking at those numbers, those levels aren't even high. As in, we see this regularly. There's so many people that are far worse off. And that's their daytime exposure for these kids. I'd be more interested in what their bedroom is like, because that's where they're supposed to repair. So anyway, so we got radio frequency radiation basically hitting us from all directions. Phone towers being your larger contributors. A few years ago, we had the introduction of the smart meter starting around the world. And that triggered a lot of health issues with people. A smart meter is not actually that powerful when it comes to radio frequency radiation, but it was introduced so fast, so quickly, and installed in so many houses all at the same time that some people were getting affected by it, and they were talking to each other, and headaches, heart palpitation, ringing ears. Those were kind of the three symptoms that people kept bringing us up about, and you know, letting other people know about it. Here in Melbourne, actually, a political party was formed whose sole purpose was to reverse the installation of the smart meters, which, you know, was unsuccessful. But now people can sort of, you know, opt out and not have these things installed. For us, if a smart meter produces a symptom, for us, it gives more an indication that there's a lot more going on in that bedroom. You've got more expertise in this area than I am, but so correct me if my story is wrong. But I normally explain to people that you got a body in perfect health, and let's say that's over here, right? And then the body has this ability to maintain balance, which we call homeostasis, beautiful word, right? And so we do things to ourselves. We eat rubbish and we breathe rubbish, and we are exposed to radiation, all that sort of stuff. And our body's amazing. It just keeps on coping, right? Maintains balance, maintain homeostasis. But you are moving further and further away from where you really want to be, right? And at some point, you get to a point where your body can no longer maintain homeostasis. You've taken an extra little step. And that's where you get a symptom, right? That's what a symptom is. The body's signal saying, I can no longer maintain homeostasis. So in this sort of line of thinking, if you get a smart meter installed and that gave you headaches, or that gave you, you know, heart palpitations, anxiety, those sorts of things, in my way of looking at it, that means you went from here to there, right? It probably only made a little bit of difference, but it pushed you into the area where your body had trouble maintaining homeostasis. So yes, you should do something about that smart meter, which you can actually do quite easily with shielding. But if anything, it should be a big alarm bell that if a simple smart meter produced this much of an issue for you, there's a lot more going on in that bedroom where you're not much closer to there instead of being all the way out here. So yeah, anyway, so that's the sort of smart meter story. I think because they got introduced so fast, it was different than, for example, when the cordless phone was introduced, right? I mean, you know, maybe your neighbors had one and you go, wow, that's handy, right? I mean, I'm old enough, I remember that time, right? And then maybe 6 months later, you might buy one, right? The introduction of that thing was far more slower. So even if our health was maybe affected, we wouldn't be able to tell because it wasn't really happening all around us. And most people sort of discount what's happening to their health as, well, that's just getting older, right? We have no frame of reference because we only have one body, right? And so I think that's sadly going on a lot. We're affected by so much of this stuff, and there's so much research to support it that, you know, a lot of what we're dealing with, it's all just low-grade stuff. I mean, and doctors, you know, they're, you know, typically trained at end-stage sort of diseases, points, and all this mucking around before it. That's not really what they're trained for. And so, yeah, I guess, you know, complementary health practitioners who are, I guess, perhaps maybe more, you know, listening to it or trying to help, you know, they sort of help these people, but only when these people come to a realization, like, hang on, I eat healthy, I exercise, I'm doing everything right, I should be more healthy than this. This can't be right. And then they start looking for answers. And of course, when it really gets awesome is when we got, you know, when we've got doctors who say, well, I'm widening what I'm doing, I'm taking these things in, and yeah, you know, these doctors are brilliant, and their practices are typically completely packed because you know, it doesn't take long for people to start hearing about them.
Let me just interject there before you carry on, because I think there's a couple of good points that you've made, is that sometimes it's just the accumulation of all these frequencies, you know, whether it's electric fields plus the high frequency fields, you know, the wireless technology. You know, in the States, there's a statistic that says the average American has 15 wireless devices. You then add a smart meter on top of that. It's just a cumulative, like you said. And then eventually that something breaks. It's the last little piece that breaks the camel's back, for want of a better description. But I do think that there's a specific field that can affect a certain person. So if they're in a certain area, they might not have a cumulative sort of, you know, insults on the body. It's just that specific frequency that causes causes significant damage in that person because we're so different and so unique, whether it's an electromagnetic field or an electric field or a high frequency, Bluetooth device that can cause issues. So I think people have got to personalize this as well. And that's where I think the home assessments are very, very important and that are unique and can prevent a lot of health issues, is because it can be so personalized. Out of the 3 different fields, before you carry on, and I know this might not be in the research, out of the electromagnetic or the magnetic fields or the high frequency, which is all the cell phones and Bluetooth devices and the Wi-Fi that's in homes, and then the electrical fields that are present in the wiring and probably in your bedroom, what do you think is the most damaging out of all those fields? Where should people what's going to move the needle the most? What have you seen being the greatest sort of, change in people's health? Because some people can't do it all. They're just getting introduced to this topic. What does your intuition say, Patrick?
Oh, that's such a tricky question. Because no matter what I answer, it's going to be wrong for so many people, right? I mean, it's a little bit like, sorry, I like this one. It's like, okay, well, you want to be hit by the train, the bus, or the car, right? Well, you kind of don't want to be hit by any of them, right? So, I find that really, really hard. Sometimes radio frequency radiation sort of gets people over the edge, and then sometimes you shield a bedroom, which is easy. You can do that yourself, but you need the right product designed with the right intent. Some people, they have a shielded room and they sleep in it that night, and they basically come out and they go, you know what, it feels like I'm camping in my own house. The feeling of getting away from it all, they have that instantly. Some people don't feel any difference. And months later, they start recognizing that their body is starting to, get to a better place. With electric fields from the wiring, I had a client of mine, actually not too far from here, who we did the assessment and we identified that there were just 2 electrical circuits that were influencing their bedrooms with the electric fields. It is, by the way, rarely 1. It is often 2 or more. I say this because some people go, "Ooh, great idea. I'm going to turn my circuit breaker off that does my power outlets at night." And then they think they fixed it, but it's often not. It's almost definitely that one, but there's often more involved, hence the assessment. So anyway, we identified 2 circuits were involved. And so about 4 weeks later, they were ready to, start some mitigation. And the lady of the house told me that after the assessment, they discussed this with the children who were also, sort of adult children who were also there at the time. And they basically, and they said, well, mom and dad said, well, we want to deal with these electric fields because we don't think this is helping us at all. And the kids basically go, yeah, no way, right? As in, this couldn't possibly affect us. And so dad said, we will do an experiment. The circuit breaker panel is outside, as it often is over here. And so he said, when you guys have gone to bed already, when mom and dad are going to bed, I will go to the circuit breaker panel and I will either turn the 2 circuits off or I might leave them on, right? Even your mom won't know either, right? I will be the only person that knows. I'll turn them on or off, we'll go to bed, and basically see how we feel. And then in the morning, I get up early, I'll turn them back on anyway, and then you guys can tell me how your night was. So they've been doing that for a number of weeks. And the kids had to admit that on the night that the switches were off, they did sleep better. But mom had an even better story she related to me. She said, you know what the weirdest thing is? She said, for months now, years now, I've been sleeping. And often I need to get up at about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and I need to go to the bathroom. When I get back to my bed, I can never get back to sleep. When we were doing that experiment, on the nights that my husband turned the circuit breakers off without me knowing about it, on those nights, I still had to go to the toilet, but I could get back to sleep. Okay. Now, I mean, that in itself is not a major deal, as in get to sleep, not get to sleep. But in terms of, has this an effect on me? Major story, I think. So it's really hard to say, well, what's important, what's not. I think electric fields have got a big impact on your sleep quality. I think radio frequency radiation has a lot of impact on your ability to rest and regenerate properly, because I think it is linked to that sympathetic nervous system. I think there's studies on cell phones use, and that raises your blood pressure. That's why I think it's hilarious when we have health monitors that are battery operated, right, and that you wear on your wrist or somewhere else on your body, and they monitor your blood pressure and then communicate that to your cell phone with Wi-Fi. Right? I just think that's hilarious, because that's a thing that raises blood pressure. Yeah. So anyway, they're not all bad. I mean, it's good to get the information, learn from it, adjust your lifestyle, but I don't think it's something you should be wearing the rest of your life. Anyway, so that's that. And then magnetic fields, we got so much research on, in terms of cancer related things. I think that's more the sort of subtle, very serious problem. So I'd hate to say to anybody, well, fix this and you've done a good thing for yourself. You gotta investigate this properly. There's lots of things you can do. I don't know if we've got time. There's lots of things you can do around the house to minimize your exposure. Let me know if we've got time for that. But the realization, that's the second thing to learn from today, is that when it comes to radiation exposure and you reducing it, you're going to need assistance. You can't do this on yourself. You need at home investigate it. You need to find out where these electric fields are coming from, and you want to know on your body what your body's absorbing in terms of radio frequency radiation. Most meters, they measure the air, and there's only a few meters that allows you to get an indication of what the body is absorbing. And we found that to be kind of really significant, because our body is a massive antenna. And we all know this if we're old enough. If we remember the tube-style television with the bunny ears on the top, right? You'd had a decent picture, something would go wrong, you'd send somebody over to adjust the bunny ears, right? And they'd be adjusting it, and you go, yeah, hold it like that, right? It's good like that. Okay. And then as soon as they let go, those picture was rubbish again, wasn't it? Yeah. And then we'd all make the same joke, wouldn't we? You'd stay there, keep holding on to it, right? But that proves our body is a massive antenna. Mm-hmm. And so we should be measuring the body to see what it's being troubled by. And if those levels are too high, then that should be dealt with, which is luckily relatively easy.
Yeah, and I think we're all different, doing a lot of heavy metal testing. We're seeing a lot of, let's look at mercury, lead, cadmium, a lot of these heavy metals, even iron. People are becoming iron toxic. And your ferritin levels are so high, you're carrying more heavy metals. You're going to be a different magnet to others, and so that's why the on-body assessments are so important, because people carry different heavy metals within their bodies. So I think that's where GeoVital is incredible. And I was blown away how important it is in terms of your personal, experience and the personal sort of magnetic field that you are. And so tell us a little bit about the home assessment. I do want to go into what people can do today, right now, if they're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube. What can they do? Because they look at me quite freaky if I say, just listen, switch off your Wi-Fi at night. They're like, no, that doesn't cause anything. That doesn't change anything. It's a hassle. Or you should be cabling. You shouldn't be even having Wi-Fi. They're like, are you ridiculous? I've never heard of something so absurd. Never mind going to these corporate offices, or even my office. There's 7 Wi-Fi signals that I pick up, at my workstation at the office. Tell us a little bit about the home assessment, and tell us a little bit what people can do today, active steps that they can do.
Okay. Well, the home assessment process, normally your consultant would have a keen interest what sort of goes on in your neighborhood. Chances are they'll rock up a few minutes early and sort of drive around your direct neighborhood, because there's often things that you haven't even realized. The cell phone tower on top of the shop just around the corner, you've never realized they were there, but they'll pick that up. There's often websites that we can access to download a list of cell phone towers that might be active in the area. This is interesting to know. It's also completely irrelevant, because depending on the building next to you, right? Let's say if you have a building next to you with a lot of metal in it, or let's say a metal roof, like over here, that's very popular, they can keep you out of the wind when it comes to radio frequency radiation, because they form an active barrier that bounces radiation back again. But then the other flip of the coin, if the angle of the roof and the pitch and the position of those is exactly in such a way that it reflects the radiation towards your house, now it intensifies it. So it's interesting to have a list. And of course, if you're in a suburb or a postcode where there's 40 cell phone towers, then it's of course more ominous than if there were 3. But in the end, it doesn't matter. You have to do that body measurement to see what you're absorbing, and that's really what all that matters, right? Measure and you know. So we look at the surroundings a little bit. Then we'd turn up at your property. If this is on ground level, then we'd be interested in the local distribution line, what sort of magnetic fields are produced there, and we'd keep a close eye on what that would do on the way to your front door. In the assessment, we do typically a bit of a pre-assessment brief, so we all know what we're about to get into. An assessment, it's not like a 10-minute process. It's not like a 30-minute pest inspection. This often takes 2.5, 3.5 hours, which people just cannot comprehend. How could it possibly take that long, right? So we go through the daytime areas of the house and we look for, hotspots of magnetic fields, which could indicate that you get something wrong with your wiring. We'll have a look at electric field exposure, although that's very hard to get on top of in an existing house in the daytime areas because you're going to have wiring everywhere. If we're building a house, which is my passion, then we can do this stuff right from the ground up, right? We can avoid these electric field exposure to a very large extent. We can put shielding in for the whole building. It's easy then because the labor is being already invested. The tradespeople are going to be there. Anyway, long story. So we'll look around in the daytime areas. We'll try and identify with you sources of radio frequency radiation. What's in your house? A typical one to be careful of is game computers. The Xbox, the PlayStation, a lot of those things connect with your Wi-Fi even when they're off. You think the lights off, the thing's not working, but if you own one, I'm sure you've turned it on one time, you go, oh look, a new operating system, right? The whole thing's changed because it just does all this work in the background. And so, yeah, radio frequency radiation can trigger your sympathetic nervous system, so it just constantly keeps you a bit on edge. So that's not good. So we look through the house and try and identify these things. And when I say we try and identify these things, we're in a habit of trying to give you the meters. It's far more interesting when you do the measuring. So we teach you how to hold it and how to not swing it around. And anyway, it's like a little mini workshop, if you will. And anyway, so you'll do a lot of the assessment under the guidance of your consultant. Daytime areas will be looked at. Your home office will probably have a good few pointers to give you. And yeah, absolutely. If you have a Wi-Fi router sitting on your desk where you need to work, that is such a bad idea. You're like front row seat to everything that puts out. And when you see it on the instrumentation, it's horrifying. So go cable. Cable's faster anyway. It's more secure. And yeah, get rid of Wi-Fi. And if you get withdrawal symptoms, this is just a joke. If you get withdrawal symptoms from turning your Wi-Fi on, like can't live without it, right? Don't worry, it'll pass. You'll get used to it. But if you need to ease yourself into it, then just get one of those timer clocks that you can put on your power outlet to the power to your router, and at least let that thing turn itself off at 12 o'clock at night. And really, if you need it 7 o'clock in the morning, then at least without thinking about it, you get a break in your exposure, especially at night, which is so important. All right, so home office, then eventually, we'll end up in the bedroom, and that's where we're going to spend the most time during the assessment. You'll be measuring around the bedroom for magnetic field exposure, again, from the wiring. Radio alarm clocks are a terrible source of magnetic field radiation most of the time because they have a transformer in it. So I'm kind of mixing the things to do with what the home assessment is like. Also, there's I love them. They're so pretty. There's lamps that you can touch and they go on, and then you touch them again and they go a little dimmer, and touch them again, they go very dimmed, and then again and they're off. Beautiful lamps. I think the shape of them and I think they're very pretty. They're terrible in the bedroom because they have a transformer in it, because of course this thing has to work all the time, right? Because it's always, are you touching me? Are you going to touch me? Right? It's always ready to react to a touch, which you might do twice a day. And in the meantime, it produces this strong magnetic field, most of them. So yeah, there's something that should not be on your bedside table. Whilst we're on the bedside table and things to do, cell phones, you should not have your cell phone in the bedroom unless it's on flight mode, right? And flight mode if you've been in a plane and you've put it on flight mode, and then you turned Wi-Fi on because you wanted to look at the movies, your phone starts to think, oh, that's what you want when you mean flight mode. So next time you put on flight mode, it leaves Wi-Fi on, right? So when you turn it on flight mode, just make sure that the indicators for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth both go off. It's okay to have the cell phone in the bedroom, but it has to be on flight mode. Don't have it under your pillow. That's too close. It's still an electrical device. It'll still have electric fields and everything around it. So at arm's reach is fine. If you're that important that you have to be rung at night and you need to be able to hear, well, just put it in the hallway. You'll hear it. You just have to get out of bed, and those occasions that you need to answer it. In terms of cell phones, you can run that thing on data cables quite easily. If you wire your house or you got some access points, you have a cable going to either side of the couch. You can buy adapters. You can make your phone run on a cable. The way you sell this to children, by the way, because it's of course for them most important to get into that habit, is that the cables are faster than Wi-Fi. Really? They're faster than Wi-Fi? Yeah, go and have a look. Oh, yeah, you're right. Right now they're motivated to use a cable. And then, of course, you don't have cellular data either, but you can just divert your cell phone to your landline and just let that ring when you're at home. So you can get away from this stuff. All right, so in the bedroom, you'll be measuring for magnetic fields. Most of the time, that won't be a problem, but inevitably, some houses it is. Then we'll measure the electric field exposure. We typically ask one partner to lie in the bed. They take their sock off. Their partner stands on the bed end, and they measure their foot. And then we can see the electric field exposure that they're getting throughout the night. Now, this is often way, way, way too high. And so that's something that we then need to investigate. Whilst the partner is in the bed, we'll also measure the radio frequency radiation. So we use this instrument that allows us to get an indication on what the body is absorbing. So you just simply pinch this thing, and then you get a number. Actually, get a number. It varies all the time because our exposure varies all the time. And we do this while somebody's lying in the bed, because you have vertically polarized radio frequency radiation waves and horizontally polarized. And so you be getting a different exposure depending on if you're standing up or lying down. And as sleeping time is most important for us, we like to do this while somebody is sleeping. And so we get their partner to do the measurements. We get them to kneel down, because otherwise they're in the way, right? They're not normally there at night, perhaps absorbing some of the radiation that comes from that direction. So we get them to kneel down, make themselves small. Then we see what the body's absorbing. If that value is too high, punchline basically is you should be shielding that bedroom, in our opinion. Once those measurements are taken, typically in all the bedrooms that need to be assessed, then we'll investigate the electric field. So one partner will be measuring the walls. The consultant will be flicking the circuit breakers on and off to figure out which circuit contributes what, and basically trying to find the winning combination of which circuits can be left off whilst the other ones are left back on, and we get the desired low levels in that bedroom. That sort of sums up. We do that for all the bedrooms, and then typically there's a debrief, as in there was a lot of information to take in, then we sort of strategize with the client, as in, okay, well, this is what we found. Do you want to leave it like that, or do you want to make it different? And most people say, I'd like to make some changes. Thank you very much. And then anyway, then we discuss, depending on if somebody's home owning or renting, the approach might be a little bit different. And we just work out what sort of the best approach is. And then some people take the bull by the horns, get everything organized and fix everything that was on the list. Some people start with one thing, and your consultant typically will give you a bit of a hint as in what they feel might be the most urgent thing to do. And so, anyway, great. Start with something, just anything. I mean, that's what is it? That old saying, three frogs were sitting on the fence. 2 decided to jump. How many are left? 3, because they only just decided. They didn't actually do anything, right? So, do something with it. But at the same breath, if you are starting, you should have peace with the fact that, listen, this is what we found. This is our to-do list. I can start with something, but the idea is you get to the end of the to-do list instead of doing one thing because it appealed to you and sort of leave the other things in place. That's not really going to sort of win the day. You might have a lucky learning experience, as in you feel a little different with that one change you did, but leaving the other ones in place is not really a really great idea. I'm sure you've got some ideas on what we can do to alleviate our exposure.
Sure. Well, I think that's a great summary, and I just want to let the listeners know and the viewers that Made to Thrive has, myself as a consultant, certified GeoVital consultant, and Peter Stutz in Cape Town. So we are going to be covering South Africa and Southern Africa. And, let us know, drop a comment on the website or our handles at Made to Thrive ZA or SteveStavs ZA on Facebook, and then on Instagram as well. And we can connect with you, and we can come and do a home assessment as well as an office assessment, because I think that's also important. There are things that people can do. We've both been trained by GeoVital, myself and Peter, and we do want to see this area flourish in South Africa and Southern Africa, because we both believe it is a huge contributor to disease and disease states. I was listening to a podcast, and in the last 100 years, high frequency or radio frequency or that includes cell phone radiation has increased over the last 100 years by 10 to the multiple of power to 18. So you're looking at 10 plus 18 zeros that have increased in high frequency radio waves in the last 100 years. And we've seen what's happened to chronic disease. It's exponentially increasing. And so contact Made to Thrive. We will be also partnering with Health Stronghold. That's your website, Patrick, is that correct? And
healthstronghold.com.
.com, and we will be looking at meters and just empowering and educating people with regards to this very pervasive and I think very damaging sort of area in our health. So thank you for that. Tell me a little bit about and I want to put you on the spot, and hopefully you can answer this, because my pretty conviction is that these devices, cell phone, and the radiation that comes with this, and I've measured on the meter in so many different places what happens to the numbers with the high frequency meter as you take a call. The difference of holding it to your ear right close by or putting it on speaker mode away from you is significant in the numbers that are measured. Tell me about cell phones. Do they cause cancer? If I put you on the spot, do you believe they're a huge contributing cause of cancer? And what can people practically do with this device?
Yeah, well, I think they absolutely cause cancer. And I think they've got a major hand in our fertility issues that we have at the same time. In terms of the cancer, the World Health Organization already classified radio frequency radiation waves, of which Wi-Fi is part of, and cell phone tower radiation, as a class 2B possible carcinogen. Now, according to many, there's enough data to upgrade it to a carcinogen. But for some mysterious reason, the research is not being looked at and not being considered. So yeah, you have to be really careful with them. If you don't want to be at risk, well, then don't have one. I know, it's painful. Nobody wants to hear that. But yeah, with a cell phone, basically distance is your friend, right? So if you met a friend in the street, right, and you were in a bus, for example, you wouldn't start whispering in their ear, would you? Right? You could probably just talk out loud with other people hearing it. When you get a phone call, just put it on speakerphone and just talk to it on speakerphone. The distance is your friend. Keep it away from your head.
Can I just interject there? If you put it on the table, is it better than holding it? Because, you can hold the cell phone like this here, far away, but you're still holding it and then you're transmitting it even. So if you put it on the table and don't touch it, I've seen the numbers dramatically reduce. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So better to just not have touch with it, put it on the table, talk to it. Then secondly, hold it in your hand. And then last thing you want to do is on your head. And then, I know we're going a little bit left and right here, but taking a phone call in the car and putting it on your head is even worse, right? Because now you have this thing sandwiched on your head and you get the radiation full blast, but you got a piece of metal this far above your head. So the radiation will be reflected in this metal and you get it twice. So, I mean, one cell phone is already sort of a microwave experiment, but doing it in the car is even worse. Yeah. So yeah, distance is your friend. Now there are pouches that you can use for this. We had patients that just said, listen, I can't make a phone call anymore without getting a headache. And so we started experimenting with fabrics, and we made these pouches, these things. I know you've seen these before.
Yeah.
So this is a pouch with an outer pocket and an inner pocket, and the inner pocket has shielded fabric in it. And so what you do, you grab your cell phone, you stick it in the outer pocket, and now you have 2 layers of shielded fabric behind your phone. And so if you have to wear it in your pocket, which I still don't recommend because it still makes a magnetic field, which is linked to health issues, fertilities. If you have to have it in your pocket, then at least position it in this pouch and then have 2 layers of shielding fabric between you and the phone. If it has to go into your purse and your purse is against your side, again, position the phone in such a way that the fabric is between you and the phone. When you get a call, as we discussed, on the table is best. Secondly, in your hand on speakerphone is best. But if you have to put it on your head, if you don't have the privacy, then you can take this pouch and just put the pouch on top of the phone. And if you have to put it on your head, now you can have the fabric, the 2 layers of fabric between you and your head, sorry, between the phone and your head. The sound will still go through. It's only a little bit reduced in strength. Most people have no problems with it. But that way you've got a physical barrier between you, helping you reduce that radiation exposure. Is it completely safe still? No, absolutely not. You should not have a phone.
Okay.
Right? But yeah, as you see, I have one too. They're a little too convenient to get away from. And it is that bedroom that matters most. So I think you can do a lot with your cell phone, changing the habits, and seriously, try and get your kids in the right habits. They're very clever. They will work out where flight mode is. They can use these cables. They're being exposed to so much rubbish from the moment they were conceived, right? Where you and we grew up, cell phone towers weren't even around you. I remember getting a beeper, right? Nobody ever beat me except my mom, right? But you wanted one because it was cool. And so anyway, I remember these towers coming, but we had already grown up to, near adults, let's say. But now the generations born now, we have no idea what they're doing to themselves. And, you were talking about testing and that sort of stuff. We haven't really touched on 5G yet, which we might be running out a little bit of time, but we have studies on 3G and 4G being problematic already. There is no studies on 5G. You're just going off the old research saying that radio frequency radiation doesn't cause a problem. Well, therefore, this must not cause a problem either, right? And that's what they're running by. But besides all this, just like with chemicals, there's no studies on the accumulated effect of all these things together. What does 3G, 4G, and 5G at the same time do us, right? There's almost no place on the planet anymore where you could have a control group, right? There's always some of this rubbish around. So, yeah, anyway, it's all very difficult. But with 5G, it's going to be more punchy signal, multiple connections to your phone. They have less penetrating power from the towers, and they're going to put more towers closer to your house, trying to get into your windows. It's just going to be a nightmare. But the light in the end of the tunnel at the moment still is that you might be exposed to this stuff everywhere you go, but you're in control of what happens in your bedroom. To a large extent, you can decide what you leave on in the house, and you can shield that bedroom if necessary. And incidentally, those are the hours in terms of your health recovery that matters most. So that's where you gotta deal with it, take it serious.
That's a very, very powerful statement, Patrick. I think, there's a lot going on in the world, and you are exposing yourself to many different sort of insults and factors, from toxins in our water to our food to, the pesticides and the glyphosate and, just everything that's out of your control. But what is in your control and the accountability you need to take is what's happening in your own home. So very powerful. Yeah. Quickly, just briefly, tell us about Bluetooth. It's a pervasive sort of field, and how damaging is it with these Bluetooth, ear pods and Apple pods that people are putting in their ears? Is it exactly the same? What damage does it cause in the body?
I'm not aware of specific studies on Bluetooth, but it is radio frequency radiation. So I would classify it as nearly the same as your cell phone. I would assume a cell phone is more powerful as it talks with something further away than your Bluetooth. But Bluetooth is still radio frequency radiation, and so I would imagine it still triggers a sympathetic nervous system. Why wouldn't it? And so it's still something you want to move away from. So these things in your ears, the hands-free, all Bluetooth enabled, I think it's all a bad idea. If you want to have something in your ear to bring the sound there, which might be good to bring up, you can get hands-free for your phone, right? You can plug headset in, a little microphone in your chest. If the electrical cable runs from your phone up the cable all the way to your ears, that means the radio frequency radiation from your phone also runs all the way up to your ears. You're basically not making much progress. If you want to do something with your phone, these pouches make a lot of sense. Or there's air tube headsets, which have basically a speaker on your chest, little ball where the sound is made, and then the sound goes to your ear through a little tube, just like a stethoscope. They do make sense. In my experience, they don't tend to last so long, but they do make sense instead of cables that run all the way up.
Well, what about that little speaker on your chest? Surely that's a source of electrical field as well, and
well, that's where it stops. So you still have the exposure up to that point, but it's better than it going straight to your head. Distance is your friend, but speakerphone absolutely.
But possibly distance to your head is more important. But that little source could be it could cause a chest tumor or a stomach tumor, because now you're aggregating the force close to that body part that's right against your stomach, so one doesn't know. Then you got these people that walk around with these Apple earpods that have got this Bluetooth firing the whole time. They just walk around with them, not even to take a call. That's just how they walk around. So you've got then this focused, radio frequency in the ear, right by the ear. So, I think most people are unaware of the damaging effects, and I think they don't realize how it's affecting their biology. Hopefully we can get this out more and more to practitioners and to the people, because I think the kids are being brought up on these devices without even knowing the damaging effects.
Yeah, actually, just whilst we're on that, just real quick, I think it's Professor Dr. Martin Paul.
Yeah,
has got a study where he's investigated the effects of radio frequency radiation on the voltage-gated calcium channels. And that is thought to be a major mechanism on how this type of radiation can have such wide-ranging effect on so many health issues or symptoms. Your cells have voltage-gated calcium channels, which allows calcium to enter the cell when required, but they can be triggered open by radio frequency radiation, and then we get an influx of calcium, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's an oxidant, right?
Yeah.
And so now your cells systemically are basically under stress. They would die quicker, they would die prematurely. And so your central nervous system has a lot of these cells, and so a lot of symptoms can be sort of related to that central nervous system as well. It's a very interesting study that might explain how the symptoms can be so wide-ranging from this.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, we're coming to the end of the show, and thank you so much for your time. I know you've just given so generously here, Patrick. But tell us your top 3, biohacks. Obviously, you're a GeoVital consultant. You've trained thousands of consultants over the years. You steeped in this field of health. But what would be your 3 top biohacks that you could leave with the audience today?
I don't know if I can easily put them in a list of 3, but that bedroom is key. That makes so much sense that no matter what therapy or what sort of healing practice you're in, it makes perfect sense that sleep is where the body repairs itself. So optimizing that sleep is going to underpin any approach to recovering health. And so, in terms of hacks, I don't know if they're called a hack. I would say you got to do this home assessment. You got to deal with the radio frequency radiation that you're affected by. You need to deal with the electric field that you're affected by from the wiring. And then something is a whole separate subject that we haven't really even touched on, maybe a discussion for another time, is the mattress that you're sleeping on. Most mattresses are made quickly with chemicals and glues, even sometimes natural materials that still don't agree with you. And we found mattresses have a major impact also in the whole recovery process. That's why we ended up 25 years ago making our own mattresses that are toxin-free, anti-static, high aeration, washable covers. Quite a unique thing. So yeah, that would be, I don't know if that's what you were after, but I think those are three very important things that you should be fixing.
Well, great. I just want to thank you for your time, Patrick. Thank you for your mission, your calling, your purpose. I know that you've spent a lot of time training consultants. You do the home assessments yourself in Australia. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you? And how can they just get more information?
Sure. Thank you. We have the GeoVital website, which you can find at en.geovital.com. But we recently also started my own website, which is on healthstronghold.com. On that website, there's a growing number of articles, which we're working on, is just launched. There's an online shop, which is just started. And there's also my consultants are listed there. There's actually the largest list of consultants within our organization is listed on that website. You can get in contact with me through the website or one of my consultants. I basically do assessments. Well, I travel the world extensively, which I am a pilot. I love flying. I spend a lot of time in Asia, the Middle East. I'm getting more and more popular, which is lovely. I'm involved with doing home assessments for ordinary families, corporate high flyers, celebrity, and even royalty have got me involved in their home and in their lifestyle. So you can contact me through that website, or you can find one of our consultants, which might be closer to it. If you were interested in this field, if you think, hey, this is something I could also be passionate about, we need a lot more help. The world's a big place. Somebody's got to save it, so it might as well be us. Investigate the training that's on offer. We do detailed training courses online in about 5-6 weeks that are ideally followed by a practical workshop of about 4 days where we actually go in houses and actually assess them. It's a unique course. Nothing like that is offered anywhere else. And so, yeah, we'd love you to train, get on board. If you have a meter, if you've bought a reasonable size amateur meter, there's a website that we started a little while ago. It's called localemf.com. This is a website where you can upload a picture of the exposure you measured and then pin it on the map at a certain location. This would be a valuable tool, especially for those people who are looking for areas where it's not so bad. It's interesting and sensational. So, oh, look how bad it is here. Yeah, okay, great. But where is it low? That's even more interesting. So if you have a meter, please contribute photos of your findings to this website so other people might be able to get a bit of a heads up on what's learning. I have a podcast channel, Health Stronghold. You can find it on the usual places. And anyway, I think that's enough.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of information. We'd like to do part 2 if you're open to it, and we can discuss other topics with regards to this huge area of electromagnetic radiation, and something that unfortunately has been growing for, just industry and convenience sake. I know 5G has been rolled out significantly in Johannesburg, and this, the home assessments that we've done at Made to Thrive have just shown that, the levels are increasing and increasing on a daily basis, and people are totally unaware. I know there was a Stop 5G in South Africa group, but a lot of those people have not taken the step to do a home assessment. So I think you've encouraged that. At Made to Thrive, we're encouraging that you would have the home assessment done. And then once you've decided, put the mitigation steps in place. So thank you so much. We wish you well and carry on with the good work. And hopefully we can, just come together. One of the pillars in Made to Thrive is community, where you can gather with people, and so we can change things. So my children are well aware of the damages of smoking and what smoking can do. Hopefully, on cell phones in the near future, that there's going to be a statement on the cell phone saying that this device causes cancer. And so hopefully we can come together and unite together so that we don't carry on going the way we are with disease and dysfunction. So thank you so much, Patrick. All the best to you. And I know that our paths have crossed for a very specific reason, and we'll hopefully continue to partner together. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.